All right, listen up everybody. Picture this scenario. You're standing on the edge of a huge chessboard, the kind where kings get dethroned and empires are built. But most of the pieces don't even realize they're part of the game. I've walked down those shadowy paths myself, from the hectic streets of New York City to the quiet libraries where the words of Machiavelli still whisper secrets about power. As an American who's witnessed the dog-eat-dog world of business, politics, and just life in general firsthand, drawing insights from that Florentine master's handbook, I'm here to pull back the curtain and reveal the 5 levels of intelligence. And I'm not talking about the book-smart kind, but the raw, survival-oriented intelligence that sets the leaders apart from the followers. Stick with me, and by the time we're done, you'll be questioning everything about where you stand in life. Shoot, you might even feel that urge to climb a little higher. And while you're thinking about it, go ahead and drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. Whether it's right here in the heart of Texas or from some rainy corner in Seattle. I want to see how far these ideas are spreading. There are 5 distinct levels of intelligence, my friends. And the majority of people never even manage to claw their way past the first one. They just shuffle through life like mere pawns in someone else's elaborate strategy, completely unaware of the moves being made all around them. But let me tell you something. Intelligence isn't about memorizing facts, acing exams, or tossing out witty zingers at cocktail parties. No, sir. It's about pure survival, seizing leverage before it seizes you, and shaping reality to fit your desires, instead of letting it crush you flat. The higher you climb up this ladder, the thinner the air becomes, until only a select few are breathing up at the summit, not just winning the game, but actually creating its rules from scratch. These levels aren't some pie-in-the-sky theory dreamed up by academics in tweed jackets. They're the harsh, lived realities that determine who's in charge and who's cowering in fear. Today, I'm going to lay it all out, so you can pinpoint exactly where you fit, and once that light bulb goes off in your head, there's no turning it back off. Pawns are everywhere you look. You pass by them on crowded sidewalks, share elevators with them in skyscrapers, and even exchange casual nods with them in suburban grocery stores. They make up the vast majority of humanity, the anonymous crowd that's constantly chattering, but leaves no lasting mark on the pages of history. What defines a pawn isn't some inherent stupidity or a lack of raw talent. Many of them are plenty sharp in their own way. It's a deep-seated blindness, a complete lack of awareness. They drift through life reacting to things, trapped in a daily grind dictated by basic fears and superficial displays. They mistake simply getting by for clever planning, and they mistake blind obedience for profound insight. A pawn genuinely believes that his thoughts are original, that they came from his own mind. But dig a little deeper and you'll see that every single idea he holds was spoon-fed to him by outside influences. Parents drilled it into him from a young age. Teachers reinforced it in school. Politicians spun it on TV. And the media hammered it home day after day. He follows laws that he had no say in creating, clings to traditions that he never bothered to question, and champions systems that slowly drain him dry without him even uttering a complaint. Ask him why he lives this pre-scripted life, and he'll parrot back canned responses. That's just the way it is. Everybody does it that way. But those aren't explanations. They're iron chains disguised as common sense. Machiavelli figured this out centuries ago in his brutally honest wisdom. Men are so simple and so readily compliant with present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who allows himself to be deceived. The pawn just swallows it all without a second thought. He accepts superficial appearances as the absolute truth, confuses raw authority with indisputable fact, and mistakes comfortable complacency for genuine freedom. Pawns live in constant fear of standing out, of going against the grain. They nod their heads when the group does, laugh on cue with the crowd, and tremble at whatever imaginary monsters the masses happen to be afraid of. They equate fitting in with guaranteed security, never realizing that invisibility just makes them expendable. Their entire sense of self is built on getting approval from the outside world. Take away the crowd's attention, and the pawn crumbles like a house of cards. Even worse, pawns harbor a deep-seated resentment toward anyone who dares to rise above them. They label bold ambition as arrogant pride, unwavering discipline as toxic rigidity, and self-reliant independence as cold-hearted egoism. They tell stories that glorify endless hard work, romanticize weakness, and shame unyielding strength. Because real power shines a harsh light on what they've chosen not to pursue in their own lives. So they huddle together under comforting illusions, faiths that value submission above all else, doctrines that stifle upward mobility, worldviews that celebrate passive surrender. They dress up their capitulation as a noble virtue. But let's be honest, virtue stripped of power is just a sideshow act, a performance for the easily fooled. A pawn's greatest fear is taking responsibility for his own life. Admitting that he's not completely helpless would force him to step up and take action. And action terrifies him, since his entire existence revolves around passively waiting for orders from on high. That's why pawns are so easily replaceable. They work tirelessly, buy whatever they're told to buy, follow the rules. And when one wears out or breaks down, another one simply takes his place without causing a ripple. No statues are erected in their honor. No lasting echoes follow them after they're gone. If this description feels a little too familiar, don't just sit there feeling down about it. That moment of recognition, that's the first crack in the wall of your prison. The first step toward moving up comes from admitting that you're trapped. Recognize those chains, and you can break them. When a pawn starts to wake up, he transforms into something sharper, more alive. He moves up to the next level. Adaptive intelligence, embodied by the parrot. The parrot struts around even louder than any pawn, having mastered the art of repeating what sounds smart, mimicking deep insights without actually understanding their depth or significance. He collects quotes, concepts, and bits of trivia like a magpie hoarding shiny objects, and then he shows them off to impress those who don't know any better. To the casual observer, the parrot looks like the very picture of wisdom. But listen closely, and the facade starts to crumble. Every word is copied from somewhere else. Every stance is borrowed from someone else. The parrot quickly adapts to the latest trends, knowing exactly which buzzwords are popular, which catchphrases sound intellectual, and which fads will keep him in the spotlight. He loves the appearance of being knowledgeable, because polishing surfaces is always easier than producing real results. As Machiavelli cleverly pointed out, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The parrot is great at putting on a show of wisdom, but peel away those stolen feathers and what's left? Not much of substance. This level traps a lot of climbers. They enjoy the praise they get for seeming smart. They revel in the adoration they receive for their vast collection of knowledge. But repeating profound statements isn't the same as creating them yourself. The parrot outlines frameworks, but never builds anything new. He recites beliefs, but never develops his own. His intelligence is reactive, not innovative. Still, give credit where it's due. This is a real step forward. Unlike the inactive pawn, the parrot explores, absorbs, and stockpiles information. He's curious, restless, and uncomfortable with silence. He starts to sense the limitations that are holding him back, but his intellect is still stuck in the safe zone of imitation. He wants the respect of the enlightened without paying the price for original thought. The parrot's weakness? He becomes addicted to the performance of intellect, building a persona around saying the right things instead of pursuing the right truth. He avoids the risk of testing his ideas against reality, fearing that the world might call his bluff. The crowd's applause always wins out over verifiable results. But some parrots get tired of this echo chamber. They grow weary of mindless repetition and crave true authority. They shift their focus from "what will make me sound smart" to "what will actually get the job done." That's when the copycat becomes a master of cunning. And from that transformation comes the third level: strategic intelligence, the fox. The fox enters the chessboard as a serious player. While pawns kneel in submission and parrots mindlessly repeat what they've heard, the fox plots with precision. Machiavelli himself warned, "A prince, therefore, being compelled knowingly to adopt the beast, ought to select the fox and the lion, because the lion cannot defend himself against snares, and the fox cannot defend himself against wolves." The fox embodies that sly nature, cunning without any sense of morality, navigation without looking back. He doesn't just go along with fate, he manipulates it to his advantage. He sees through the layers of deception, paying attention to hidden motivations rather than surface-level chatter. Wily and watchful, he detects opportunities that others miss. The fox thrives in chaos, figuring out how people reveal their desires and fears, and then using that information like a surgeon's scalpel. He trades in whispers, timely moments, and subtle advantages. Outsiders attribute his successes to good fortune, but his luck is meticulously crafted. He analyzes gatherings like battle plans, calibrating his moves with surgical precision, always staying one step ahead of the naive. Unlike the attention-seeking parrot, the fox enjoys quiet victories. He doesn't need to brag about being the smartest person in the room. He just needs to win. His satisfaction comes from influence, from pulling strings behind the scenes. He's not bound by moral codes or groupthink. Results matter more than appearances. Impact matters more than endorsements. But the fox isn't perfect. His victories tend to be short-lived, and his power is fragile. Cunning can deceive and manipulate in the present, but the future demands new tricks and endless schemes. This constant cycle keeps him in a state of perpetual vigilance, always the hunter fearing that he'll become the hunted. The fox lives in a world of suspicion, constantly afraid of being exposed. Once his schemes are revealed, his empire crumbles, allies become enemies, trust evaporates, and yesterday's ingenuity becomes today's condemnation. Men of intelligence are admired, Machiavelli observed, but they are not loved. Yet the fox plays a vital role. Without him, systems become stagnant. He shakes things up, sparks innovation, and exposes weaknesses that the blind ignore. He proves that intelligence must be put into action, not just talked about. But ultimate power requires more than fleeting maneuvers. To climb higher, the fox must move beyond quick wins and develop lasting strategies. Those who are tired of temporary gains evolve into something greater. They take a step back, broaden their perspective, and start reshaping the entire landscape. From the cunning ashes of the fox rises the fourth level: manipulative intelligence, the puppeteer. The puppeteer despises petty tricks and temporary influence. While the fox has to be nearby to pull the strings, the puppeteer sets off chains of events that continue moving forward without his direct involvement. He understands that true power isn't about making clever remarks or plotting short-term schemes. It's about triggering key events so that others act according to his plan, believing they're doing it on their own. The puppeteer's genius? Disguising coercion as free will. He creates situations where people are convinced they're making their own choices, but every path leads back to his design. He offers advice to leaders, stirs up conflict when harmony threatens his plans, and calms things down when agreement helps him. His influence weaves invisibly through the structure of choice. Unlike the restless fox, the puppeteer plays the long game, patient, methodical, and willing to wait seasons or even eras for his plans to come to fruition. He relies on believable deniability. His fingerprints are all over the scene, but they're impossible to detect. If questioned, he fades into the background, letting his unknowing accomplices champion the goals he engineered. The puppeteer's danger? He loses himself in endless disguises. Relationships become temporary, friendships become conditional, and actions become purely calculated. Trust? A rare luxury for someone who analyzes every motive. He collects loyalty like medals, but gives nothing in return. Nevertheless, the puppeteer represents advanced intelligence. He's moved beyond pure reaction. He doesn't just compete, he warps the competition. He creates divisions, directs motivations, and crafts stories that guide entire populations. His intelligence operates systematically, not loudly. But even this pinnacle has limitations. The puppeteer is still tied to the game he's manipulating. He operates within someone else's system. For all his brilliance, he hasn't built the stage. He's just directing the actors. To reach the ultimate level, he must abandon disguises and deceptions altogether. Stop playing roles. Start dictating the rules. Beyond the puppeteer lies the rarest form of intelligence. Visionary, the architect. The architect sits at the top of the hierarchy, the rarest of all. He abandons personas and mere manipulation. He builds the platform where everyone else performs. The architect creates frameworks, institutions, and constructs that shape the behavior of entire civilizations. His intelligence goes beyond the individual. It's foundational, outliving his time and his physical existence. He understands that power is fragile when it's tied to a single person, ego, or moment. Therefore, he spreads his influence through codes, customs, innovations, and organizations. He knows that crowds are drawn to spectacles, but only structures endure. While pawns submit, parrots repeat, foxes scheme, and puppeteers orchestrate, the architect designs. He writes the rules that others consider eternal. His threat? Absolute detachment. He doesn't crave applause or recognition. He knows that attention invites attack. Instead, he embeds himself within his creations. His name may fade, but his structures guide decisions, shape societies, and steer destinies. He's the unseen force driving nations, corporations, and movements across generations. The architect combines foresight with determination. No structure lasts without discipline, force, and sacrifice. He puts in place mechanisms that reward loyalty, punish betrayal, and immortalize his vision. Mere influence or control isn't enough. He seeks eternity, and eternity requires transcending the self. Few people achieve this level. It demands the death of the ego, the sacrifice of fame, and the abandonment of glory. It requires the obliteration of identity so that the work can thrive. The architect rejects memorials. He insists that his design is greater than he is. This zenith redefines intelligence, not winning within the existing game, not controlling the players, but creating the game's very essence. Look at this apex, and the lower levels shrink to insignificance. While crowds fight for attention, the architect shapes reality. Before we finish, take a moment to think. These levels aren't just abstract concepts. They're choices you make every day. You're constantly signaling your position: pawn, parrot, fox, puppeteer, or architect. And every day you have the opportunity to climb higher. This ladder isn't about inherent talent. It's about awareness, perseverance, and action. Most people go through life unaware that the game even exists. But you've now seen the blueprint. There's no going back. The question is, will you climb? The pawn yields, the parrot mimics, the fox manipulates, the puppeteer orchestrates, and the architect creates. What are you building yourself to be? And as a final thought from this seasoned American perspective, drawing on Machiavelli's timeless wisdom, consider how these levels manifest in our own country. Think of the tech giants, who didn't just create apps, but transformed global commerce. Or the founding fathers, who didn't just manipulate colonies, but drafted a constitution that still governs a superpower. That's architect-level play, enduring through time. Or the Wall Street foxes, who skirt regulations with clever loopholes, only to see their empires collapse during financial crises. Our history is filled with these archetypes, from robber barons to modern moguls. It reminds us that in this land of opportunity, climbing isn't just possible, it's the American way. But it requires letting go of illusions and embracing hard work. So, where do you stand? The game is on, and it's your move.